Hey, yo, welcome back to another episode of the most authentic and nuanced holistic health and fitness podcast hosted by your favorite crunchy strength and conditioning coach. I'm Kelsee Moore, and today we're talking about should you cycle sync? Everybody knows at this point you should have a 28 to 35 day menstrual cycle, and there is so much information out there now about males versus females, how you should train, how you should not train. So much information, and I'm going to give you guys a down and dirty of my opinion of it. Obviously, I have changed my stance on this or refined it over the years, but my current project that I'm working on for work is called Training the Female Operator. And throughout the process of collecting information for that project and for that presentation and PowerPoint, I have collected and read so much information about how the menstrual cycle creates more of a flexible training style for females, whereas a male hormonal cycle creates a more stable training cycle for them. So I cannot wait to give you guys this information. I'm going to, I know you guys don't care. And if you're watching on YouTube, oh, I hope this is recording video. It should be. Sorry, checking a couple things here. Long story short, I set up my streaming live on my Riverside podcasting studio, which is the online studio that I use to record my podcasts. And I just panicked because I thought that I was currently streaming this live to my YouTube channel, which fine, I guess. Not really what I intended, but I think we're okay. Okay, couple updates, housekeeping things before I get rolling with all this information. I have had some of the coolest guests recently. I had my chiropractor, Savannah. I had Bethany, who is a self-defense expert, female self-defense expert. We talked about concealed carry. We talked about, pepper spray versus pepper gel versus what should you have for emergency preparedness in your home, first aid kits for your car, all these really cool topics that I gleaned so much information from. And in my own personal life, I'm definitely preparing more of a prepper stash in my house, which maybe I can do a whole other episode on that. Okay, I need to write down that idea. But that's a whole other episode of just starting to collect dry goods. Why am I doing that? Am I paranoid? Which I'm not paranoid, I just feel like it's really smart to have and have those things in place. So I've been working on that in my personal life. But other guests that I've had is, I've obviously talked with the pregnancy center, the Life Care Pregnancy Center out in Carthage, North Carolina. I talked to them recently. I'm starting to get a course put together for some of the ladies that attend there. I'm hoping to do a health and wellness 3-part course in October timeframe. And then in the spring, I'm hoping to do a 3-part course on nutrition. So super pumped. I actually had 20 women respond on my Instagram when I asked if you would be willing to be a sponsor or, donate your time or expertise or help. And it was really cool to see women rallying around this cause, which is really cool. And just side note on that, I think as believers, it's even more important to clear up why this should be a part of our passion. And I love to make those connections is, I think a lot of times, I know you guys don't listen to me for politics, but I do think it's important to point out, I think a lot of times, the left or more progressive side of politics is all about welfare, all about helping the lower income class, all about helping those that, are maybe a little bit less fortunate. And I think the interesting thing is that as conservatives, we can um people can assume that we don't care about lower class people, or maybe people that have lower income or don't have as many privileges, or maybe they're dealt a deck of cards it's a little bit more difficult in life, and it kind of can come across that we don't care about them because our politics are going to be more of a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of idea. But I think where conservatives, specifically Christians, can probably find a middle ground is this whole idea that the government or the federal government, my power just went out in my house. Interesting. We'll see how this goes. This is why I have my emergency preparedness kit, people. My power just went out in my house. Why? I don't know. I'm going to keep rolling with it. If you're watching this on YouTube, sorry, my light doesn't work. Currently, my Wi-Fi is still working, so I'm going to keep going. How strange. Okay, give me 5 seconds. Sorry, hold on. Okay, false alarm. Sorry, power didn't go out. I guess my light just turned off. Whatever. Okay, let me get back to this serious conversation on politics. But I think where Christians can kind of meet in the middle is this idea that the federal government, from a conservative perspective, should be a limited federal government encouraging outward protection from international entities, inward freedom, meaning that people inside the United States should have the most and as much freedom as possible so we can decide how we want to live our lives, right? Which in turn kind of comes across that the federal government isn't going to help you. They're not going to give you money. They're not going to give you jobs. They're not going to give you anything. That's kind of the whole idea, right? But my middle ground is that I agree with all of that. The people that need to close that gap with people who are in need is the church. It's absolutely the church. I don't think that the government has a responsibility. I think there's a responsibility for like basic protections and safety, and that could boil down to like local government. My light went out again. Okay, well, maybe I'm just gonna have a super dark YouTube video. Sorry, guys. I tried to make this aesthetically pleasing and it's biting me in the butt. Or I just need to buy better equipment. But I think that's where we can find a middle ground as conservatives, is understanding that, yes, we can vote very conservative on like limited federal government, lots of internal freedoms. Yes, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But as believers, as Christians specifically, as a church, we should come alongside and love for those that are less fortunate. Because what does the New Testament tell us? Care for the widows and the orphans, the people that are the most vulnerable in society. It is the church's job to care for them, not necessarily the federal government. Okay, politics put aside. That is why I truly believe that if we are going to be staunchly pro-life, then we need to be out there. We need to be out there helping centers. And arguably speaking, you know, church is back. I think it's like 80% of most like pregnancy centers that are like outside of Planned Parenthood anyways. So the church is doing its good work. Like it's doing quite literally the Lord's work. So it's not like I'm harping on the church at all. I'm just like talking to the individual person of just like, hey, if this is what you believe about politics and you are a Christian, it is quite literally our job to care for the widows and the orphans and the women who are marginalized and the women who are less fortunate in our society. Go out there, girlfriend. And if you listen to that podcast with the pregnancy center, then you know that a couple months ago, my husband asked me what's like the most prominent thing politically that I care about. And I told him, I think being pro-life. And then he straight up asked me, what are you doing about it? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I really don't know what else of my time I can give. And the Lord provided a really cool opportunity to mix my love for ancestral eating and living and health and wellness and bring it to women who are in maybe like not as like healthy relationships, or maybe they don't have a ton of expendable income, especially if they're going to this pregnancy center. So it's been a really good challenge for me to take all this information that can come across as a little elitist, that like I have time or funds to care about like organic foods, but how can I boil that down to somebody who needs to simplify their life, not complicate it? So, anywho, listen to that podcast with the pregnancy center. Super, super cool, super fun. So glad I was able to connect with them. And I'm really looking forward to my class. I'm still working on putting everything together for that. Okay. Other life updates. Doing the podcast, hopefully doing it every other Thursday. I didn't really know what to expect when I first started the podcast. And just like how many guests I would have, how long it would take me to like edit it and put it together. And I think I'm settling on every other Thursday currently. I don't really feel the need to do seasons, like close it out. I love doing it. It's just more of like when am I going to get around to like interviewing that many guests? I think that would take a while. So every other Thursday, look for the pod. I'm also buying a new camera. I'm buying a camera from my brother. So I'm hoping to have my in-person interviews be kicked up a notch with the YouTube action. So excited about that. I know some people, mainly my sister, shout out Haley, who watches my YouTube channel, working on that for sure. A couple other things that are going live. When you hear this podcast on Thursday, what is it, July 18th, I think, when this is posted, pulling up the calendar, from July 17th. So like yesterday, if you're listening to this when it comes out, yesterday, July 17th through July 31st, I am doing over a $300 giveaway of all of my Crunchy Coach favorite products and items for my 1-year birthday anniversary for More & Company. All you have to do is go to my Instagram, find the post that I posted yesterday, Wednesday the 17th. It's going to say, Crunchy Coach giveaway. All you have to do on that post, this is literally it. All you have to do is like the post, follow my page, Heyo More & Co., comment and tag a friend and tell them what you admire about them. Literally, that's it. Unlimited entries, unlimited friends tagged and compliment. That's quite literally all you have to do. Okay? $300 worth of my favorite crunchy items. And there are some pretty good items. I'm going to actually list off a couple right now. I've got the Raw Milk and Deadlifts Make Milk Raw Again Red Hat. Iconic. And wow, what a time to be alive to wear a red hat right now. Donald Trump just had an assassination attempt. Literally, when was that? Yesterday? Sunday? Saturday. It was Saturday. Woof. Talk about a red hat gang. My goodness. Okay, well, you're going to get one if you win this giveaway. Getting that hat, which is like an iconic hat. You're getting 2 ounces of my homemade honey tallow whip, which is a bestseller at a local market here. I make it myself. Tallow, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished from Harris Home Place Farm. Love them. I'm giving you some pepper spray. I'm giving you the Shauna Holmes, a little less toxic Fontana candle that she came out with, honey lemon. I'm giving you a salt menstrual disc. I'm giving you some Regenerative Farm stickers. Hold on, let me get the box and I'm going to just talk because I have my microphone clipped to my shirt. I have a car tourniquet. I have face scrub. I have the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. I have a set of at-home gym resistance bands. I have silicone toe spacers. I have lemon lime relight from Redmond's Real Salt. I have Body Glide. I have a weekly planner. So ladies, that's all you have to do, with a personal note from yours truly telling you how much I appreciate you sticking around this chaotic side of the internet. I can't speak clearly. And as I'm figuring out just like Instagram, social media, all of it. So all you have to do is, tag a friend, tell them what you admire about them on that Instagram post. That's all you have to do. Okay. I will announce the winner August 1st. So you have a couple weeks to do it. Get after it, ladies. For sure. Okay. Couple other things. Still working through them. Sorry. Having my aunt, Mickey Stillman, come on my members only Zoom call on July 30th, talking about perimenopause. If you are not a member, a workout member, or a Crunchy Company member on my website, by the way, the easiest way to hop on the Zoom call is to join the Crunchy Company, which is $5 a month. Okay. You can hop on the Zoom call. That's literally all you have to do. She's talking about perimenopause. She's talking about how to exercise, how to eat, some things that she learned in her own life, anecdotal experience. I think it's going to be great. If you're interested, hop on the Crunchy Company, join our Zoom call July 30th. Love it. I'm so excited. Lastly, sorry, so many announcements. I know I'm already 15 minutes into this podcast. Lastly, the one and only Liz Hazelmeyer has agreed to do a live podcast recording in August. And we're talking about exercise for kids. She has a phenomenal experience and relationship with her girls. And if you listen to their podcast or follow Liz, you know that like while Liz was exercising a lot, she got her daughter Sophie to also start exercising, and Liz has just seen that growth so much in her daughter. And so we're teaming up. We're doing a live podcast recording for our members. So Liz has a Substack community and I have my members. This is the time to be alive, ladies, to join the Crunchy Company. The Crunchy Company, again, is $5 a month or $50 a year. And you can get access to all of these Zoom calls, all of these live Zoom calls, which I hope to have more of with my guests too. And if you are on the Zoom call, the live Zoom call, you can ask a live question during the recording. It will be posted to my regular podcast afterwards. But if you want to ask Liz a question or me a question about exercise for kids, you can join the live podcast. And I will put it out on an email. So don't fret. I will publish that probably in the August newsletter if you're on my email chain. Okay, sorry. Went through all of our announcements. I haven't talked to you guys, just myself in a while, and it always feels a little vulnerable. And I always feel like slightly goofy and weird that I'm talking to my camera, but we're going to roll with it. Today, we're talking about cycle syncing. We're talking about how you should potentially adjust your training if you are on your period or if you're not feeling good. What signs should you listen to? What signs do you not need to listen to? Yada, yada. Okay, let's do some groundwork first. Let me take some water. I just poured that water all down my shirt. Of course I did. Okay. What are things we should know firsthand? First of all, lay the groundwork. Okay, males. The predominant sexual hormone that men have to determine a lot of these primary sexual functions and secondary sexual functions, primary being like testicles, secondary meaning like facial hair and high muscle mass, right? Is going to be testosterone. Testosterone promotes bone formation, protein synthesis, and erythropoietin secretion. So some things to know specifically about males is that also this kind of plays into like when you're thinking about the LGBTQ movement, I'm just like, what is a woman? What is a male? What are some physiological differences that we should know based on biology, right? Bringing politics back into this. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. But I think these are really good things to know. It's like, it's not just about taking hormones, it's about your body wanting to get back to homeostasis. And the homeostasis for a man is going to be secreting testosterone. Their bones are going to be denser, they're going to be larger. Without them doing literally anything, that is happening. Protein synthesis, meaning that their body, when they are fueled, when they are training, when they are sleeping, their body wants to create protein. They want to create more tissue. Erythropoietin, which is also EPO, so I'll just shorten it to EPO. EPO secretion creates more red blood cells, meaning that men typically have more red blood cells, which also means that they have a higher oxygen carrying capacity than women, which is interesting to note right off the bat. Okay. Females specifically, estrogen is going to be the predominant hormone that's going to determine a lot of these secondary characteristics of women. One, estrogen promotes fat storage. And obviously we know from a primal standpoint that is so that we can adequately reproduce. It also, the increase in estrogen also, it is kind of a catalyst for the inhibition of anabolic stimuli, meaning when estrogen is high, particularly in your luteal phase, your second half of your menstrual cycle, it will then downregulate anabolic stimuli, meaning it's going to downregulate the ability to create more muscle tissue. It's not necessarily decreasing your current muscle tissue, it's just slowing down the rate of creating more muscle tissue, which is interesting. And obviously, both of those things, fat storage plus when estrogen is high, the inhibition of anabolic stimuli is going to create a smaller total body mass, primarily from bones, size of organs, blood volume, muscle mass. All of that is going to create a smaller total body mass. Okay, going back to males. Males have a circadian rhythm, meaning that they are on a 24-hour clock, and that mimics the sun. If you look at how our universe operates, men are like the sun, women are like the moon. Okay. Also, nutrients support output, or work output. That's what I like to say, meaning that when men are fed and they're sleeping a lot, their body wants to work for the greater good of something external, meaning that they are lifting more weights, they are running more, they are doing more work, right? Which is something that's really unique to men. Whereas for women, nutrients support internal energy. And we'll get to that in just a second. Males, because of their high testosterone, are much more resilient to stress. And I know this pisses people off because immediately you're going to have an emotional response. And you're going to say, I'm a woman and I am so stressed and I can handle it though because I am a working woman. That's not what I mean. I'm saying physiological. Objectively speaking, men have a higher resilience to stress, meaning it's shown in inability to increase muscle mass and maintain acute testosterone levels after exercise, meaning that testosterone levels after exercise can be maintained, showing a resilient to stress, whereas after exercise, women are more prone to a very high cortisol dump. Okay? Can we all accept that, physiologically speaking? Do I also need to preface I'm a gal and I run and I eat and you can still accomplish great things, okay? But we need to be flexible. We need to be flexible. Men are stable, women are flexible. Women are fluid. Women have ups and downs. That's great. We need that, right? Where men are very stable in that sense. Okay, women have an infradian rhythm, meaning that we are like the moon, which is about a 28 to 35 day cycle. Women in like the ancient world, do you guys hear that thunder? Oh my goodness. Women in the ancient world would actually track their menstrual cycle by the moon, which is just so cool. And again, like whether you're new agey and that's cool, or whether you're a Christian and that's cool, regardless, that's freaking cool. Like it's almost like humans, animals, the earth, Mother Nature, the weather, the food, we're all in a symbiotic relationship. It's almost like this continues to point in that direction, right? Nutrients support an internal energy, meaning that women's bodies want to conserve, conserve, conserve. And if you look at the broader and greater picture, it's because women's bodies want to prep the next generation. If we didn't do that, humanity would cease to exist. And in the greater picture of how God has designed the earth and how we reproduce, somebody had to do it. Men or women, somebody had to take on that responsibility. And it's women, right? That's a massive responsibility. And so something that's interesting is that women are very sensitive to stress. Cortisol is derived from progesterone, mood, and a sleep stabilizer. Also, if you can't tell, I'm sorry, I'm working off of my PowerPoint. That is my project in my presentation. So if you feel like I'm saying like these bullet points, it's because I'm working off quite literally the PowerPoint. It's keeping me on track, okay? Cortisol is derived from progesterone, and progesterone is a mood and sleep stabilizer, meaning when your progesterone is low, you will see massive mood swings in the second half of your menstrual cycle, and you will also have a really hard time sleeping soundly or through the night or falling asleep. And so when cortisol is high from a lot of stress being experienced, then your progesterone will naturally be low. And we know at this point that progesterone, which is progestation, what is needed to maintain a healthy pregnancy, is going to be depleted if you have high cortisol. Now, that stress means that it's not just exercise. It's not just a lot of stressful meetings like that. It's not just a busy calendar. It's stress holistically, meaning that you have a busy calendar and you're working out a lot, plus you're not eating enough, you're not sleeping enough, right? It's the imbalance between the output and the input. That is the stress, if you needed to boil that down. Okay, it is the imbalance of the two. Because that's why it's so inappropriate to take that statement that cortisol derives from progesterone, therefore women should not have cortisol spikes. It would be so like illogical to take that statement and then slap it on pro female athletes or slap it on CrossFit athletes, right? Because you're saying, oh my gosh, they have so much stress in their life. But I say, no, no, no. It's not an imbalance in that conundrum. They are, yes, working out so much, but yes, they're also sleeping so much, eating so much. They would not be a professional athlete, and they would not have gotten to that level and trained so hard for so long if they had that type of imbalance, because women's bodies would not, it would not hold up very well if that had a major imbalance. I hope everyone kind of understands that. It is not purely stress, it is the imbalance of stress and recovery. Okay. Now let's do a basic menstrual cycle overview. I like to say there's two basic phases. One is your follicular phase on the first half of your menstrual cycle, and you have a luteal phase, which is the second half of your menstrual cycle. Obviously, we know that your menstrual cycle starts with bleeding, which is going to be the first couple of days of the entire cycle. After you're done bleeding, you're going to work into the follicular phase, where your body is then trying to prepare another follicle for an egg to be released, hopefully moving towards ovulation, which is about the midway point. Okay, some women don't ovulate on day 15 exactly. I think according to my aura ring, I'm sitting at day like 18 to 19. Okay. Then that is what everything is being worked up to. It's working up to ovulation. That is the main event. And then after you ovulate, you are either pregnant or not pregnant. If you are pregnant, then your hormones will start creating and secreting more progesterone so that you can maintain that healthy pregnancy. If you are not pregnant, then estrogen and progesterone continue to climb. Once your body realizes that you're not pregnant, then you have a downturn of all of those hormones. But that second half of your cycle is called the high hormone phase. And when estrogen is high, like I've already talked about, it stimulates the inhibition of anabolic processes, creation of testosterone, and bone formation, muscle formation, right? So first half of your menstrual cycle, follicular phase, low hormone phase. I also call that kind of the anabolic phase, meaning that your body wants to create bone density. Or higher bone density. It wants to create muscle mass. It wants to burn fat. It is much more resilient to stress on the first half of your menstrual cycle. After ovulation, your body is so much more sensitive to that, meaning you're probably going to feel more lethargic if you're not taking care of yourself. You're probably going to feel, your legs are going to feel more tired after you run or after you squat. Maybe your mood is kind of all over the place. Maybe you're feeling more insecure. Maybe you're more anxious or worried, or you're more cynical of yourself, or you're a pessimist. That all starts to come out on that second half of your menstrual cycle. And that's not necessarily to tell you to change things. I want you to take in this information so that on that second half of your menstrual cycle, I call that the catabolic phase, meaning your body is going to downregulate all of those positive things. It just means that we need to be much more flexible with our training. We need to understand this information objectively, right? More information creates more freedom in our choices. Then we can make some really good adjustments for ourselves so that we can keep training. And I think I've said this before on a couple different podcasts when I was a guest, but if you don't know this information about yourself, if you don't at all, also, I didn't give the caveat. This is when you're not on birth control, not on birth control. I'll give that spiel in a second. I need to go back to that. Okay. But I gave this spiel, a different spiel on somebody else's podcast, basically saying, if you didn't know this information about your body, then you would have 2 weeks of really great training. You would strength train, you would run, you would feel like $1,000,000 because you're in your follicular phase, you're in your anabolic phase. Awesome. Then on weeks 3 and 4, all of a sudden you're saying, oh, my clothes are tight. Oh, I don't like this. Oh my gosh, I'm eating so much food. Wow, I feel guilty. Wow, I'm not sleeping very well. Does my partner still love me? Like there's all this stuff that starts to well up and you're like, I'm ditching my plan. I'm ditching my workout plan. I'm ditching my food plan. I'm going to do all these crazy things. I'm going to binge and purge, and I'm going to nip and tuck and change my clothes. And it's just like this whole conundrum, right? Whereas if you know this information and you can learn this information, then you can say, oof, I'm starting to feel really pessimistic. I'm starting to feel really insecure. I'm starting to not trust my plan, not trust my process. That's when I tell that girl, hey, it's all right. Your follicular phase is coming. Just stay the course. We can cut some of the volume. We can cut some of the high intensity stuff, but stay the course. It'll be okay. We're fine. Stick to the plan. It offers that masculine stability to the plan that is kind of that yin and yang. Whereas if you just had a bunch of women who are much more fluid in their mood, training, connection, ability to others, then all of a sudden it's like, let's go left, then right, and then up, then down. It's like it can feel like you don't know which direction to go and you don't have confidence in that direction. So, all that to say, luteal phase can be a beast for some people. And if it's drastic, then go get your hormones done. Go work with a functional medicine doctor, right? But if this is like kind of normal and you have some basic PMS symptoms, it's going to be okay. Stay the course, okay? So, first half of your menstrual cycle, follicular, second half luteal. Okay, I need to talk about birth control. These natural hormones will rise and fall. Estrogen, progesterone, luteinizing hormone, and follicle stimulating hormone. They will rise and fall according to the basic menstrual cycle plan every 28 to 35 days. They will rise and fall when they are supposed to, when you have a normal and healthy menstrual cycle. When you are on birth control specifically, when you're on your hormonal IUD or you are on the birth control pill, those hormones will not happen. Specifically with hormonal birth control, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone will be non-existent. But then you're probably taking a combination pill of a low dose of synthetic estrogen and progesterone, which means that if you are watching me on YouTube, then your chart kind of looks like beep, 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 beep every single day because you're taking estrogen and progesterone every single day. Like you have a ding on the calendar every single day with estrogen and progesterone. But in a real and regular menstrual cycle, you have a massive rise and fall throughout your entire menstrual cycle of estrogen progesterone that does not mimic the same graph pattern as if you're taking synthetic birth control. So all of these facts that I'm giving to you today are under the notion that you're not taking hormonal birth control because you will not have the same experiences of when you need to train differently. You'll not have the same experiences of maybe mood swings or feeling tired or feeling great, right? Like you will not have the same experiences as someone who is not on that medication. So, as a caveat, assess your own life, make a wise decision. Okay, 28 to 35 days without the presence of hormonal birth control. Generally speaking, you should have minimal PMS symptoms, both physical and mental PMS symptoms. And like I've already said before, the cycle mimics the moon in all 4 seasons. So something that's really cool is that starting out in your menstrual phase, meaning your bleeding phase, all 4 of your dominant hormones, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, estrogen, and progesterone, are at their lowest. And that's when you're quote unquote most like a man, meaning that you're probably the most motivated. Let's talk about the positive things that most really secure and healthy men have, right? You're probably the most motivated. You probably take the initiative. You probably have high work output. You are looking for the common good between you and the peers around you. That would be great, right? But you're also seeking probably less connection. Wait, that doesn't make sense. I need to go back. That doesn't make sense. No, we're not seeking. Hold on. I got my PowerPoint wrong. I read the wrong section. As I was talking, I was like, women do not take the initiative on their menstrual cycle. That was a flub. Whoa, are you listening to this lightning? I hope you are. Let me back up. Most like a man basically means that you are seeking less connection, and you have less creativity. Those are the aspects of a man that you're pretty much experiencing throughout your bleeding menstrual phase, okay? You're not wanting to look for the common good of others. You probably hate other people while you're bleeding. But specifically in connection and creativity, probably at their low points during your bleeding phase. So, sorry for the flub. But something that's really interesting is that your spatial cognition and ability to identify problems are actually at their highest, which is interesting because when you're also on your menstrual phase or your bleeding phase, you probably can point out some problems in your partner or in your house or in yourself really, really well. Being super critical. So, in a positive light, you're pointing out problems, you're pointing out things to change. In a negative light, you're very cynical during your bleeding phase, okay? And something that's really interesting is that your menstrual phase is kind of like winter, meaning that you are craving like kind of that hibernating style. Maybe you're more lethargic and introspective. You're craving hearty cooked foods. You're kind of like you're wanting to rest and reflect rather than going out, which I know I said like a man, like a man. This podcast episode is a mess. I really should make this podcast a little bit more professional, but here we are. Basically speaking, your menstrual cycle is like the winter. You're lethargic, you're hibernating, you're cynical, you're tired. That's your menstrual phase, okay? A couple things that's kind of interesting when you're talking about training during your menstrual phase. It's actually starting off your anabolic stage. Remember how I said the front half of your menstrual cycle is your follicular phase, which actually means your low hormone phase, quote unquote, most like a man, right? That's also kickstarting your anabolic stage, meaning that you're actually more likely to build and create more bone tissue and more muscle mass starting in your menstrual cycle, starting in your menstrual phase. And so you actually can have really great strength and power gains in your bleeding phase. You're a little bit less volume tolerant. So I know when the average person thinks about exercise, you're thinking about like volume, time, intensity, strength, power, endurance. Like they all kind of sound the same. Like you don't know how to uniquely define those. So I will do that for you. Okay. Less strength and power gains, meaning that strength, under the definition of can you move something from A to B through a force of your own muscles, right? And power, meaning that you can move something from A to B quickly. There's a time component to power, right? It's explosive power. Your ability to move objects a couple of times that are really heavy is really great during your period. Plot twist. You're not a little vegetable during your menstrual cycle, okay? You're actually a strong queen. Okay? Women always want to like take on this victim mindset with their period, but I'm like, that's from the patriarchy. Okay? Stop it. Move on. What I want to tell you is you have great strength and power gains during your anabolic phase, during your bleeding phase. Okay? But you're less volume tolerant, meaning that maybe we're not going for a crushing 1 hour run. Maybe we're hanging out with a 30-minute chill run. That's all that means. Less volume. Okay? Maybe instead of 8 exercises, maybe you're doing 4 exercises, but super high quality. That would be less volume. Okay? Something that's also interesting is that your pain receptors are a little bit dimmed. So you're actually less likely to feel pain and have better recovery during your menstrual phase. Again, people aren't telling women that, but it's the truth, okay? But something mentally that we should understand is that training efficacy may be low due to lethargy. Meaning that because we're in our winter phase, right, we're feeling a little lethargic, we're feeling tired, we want to hibernate, we're introspective, we're insecure, our clothes are not fitting, we're bloated. It means that our training efficacy, our willingness and motivation to train is probably pretty low. So as a coach, that part in itself is really positive to know because remember when I said, like you could kind of have a meltdown during like a 4-week training cycle where you're like, this isn't working. What? And then you like ditch it all and want to start something else, hoping that like you get back on track. The reality is, as a coach, I can just say, girl, you're in your winter phase. It's going to be okay. We need to get through the week. Cut the volume, have good strength and power sets, and go take a nap. That's all it means. Okay? Literally, that's all it means. Something that's interesting on a 4-week cycle is that I actually would not put this as a deload week. I actually would put a deload week actually on your late luteal phase, which we'll get to at some point. Generally speaking, your lifting should be moderate volume, moderate load, meaning that you're generally doing 3 sets on your main lift and 2 to 4 sets on accessories. Remember, we're not hitting volume here. We're hitting really good quality strength and power sets. That's what we can take advantage of in this phase. Your cardio, you could really take advantage of anaerobic sprint intervals because the time is probably going to be shorter. Meaning instead of going out for a 60-minute run, maybe we're doing 5 200-meter sprints with appropriate work to rest cycles. So maybe we're doing 5 sets of 200s with 3-minute rest. Simple option there, right? Because we have high power output in this phase, power within a cardio sense kind of points more towards anaerobic sprints, meaning like high intensity sprints, but with rest. Okay. But we're volume intolerant, meaning that we're not going to go out and run. We're probably not going to feel very great. Okay. Okay. Follicular phase. Now, this is the bulk of the first half of your phase. Okay. Your progesterone stays pretty low. Your estrogen starts to rise as you get closer to your ovulation. Your follicle stimulating hormone is kind of falls right before your ovulation phase. And your luteinizing hormone has a really steep spike moving on to your ovulation phase. But we're still in that anabolic overarching first half of the cycle, which the follicular phase is like your bread and butter. It's like your springtime. It's great. Okay. Estrogen, follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone are all generally starting to rise. The interesting thing too is that your basal body temperature is lower, meaning that you are more heat tolerant in your follicular phase because your basal body temperature is lower. Okay. Now that is a non-hormonal way to track your ovulation and your pregnancy status. Basically, on just like if you want to get pregnant or avoid pregnancy, that can be a form of birth control, which the Oura Ring does for you, or natural cycles. But it's basically the fertility awareness method, meaning that if you understand that your basal body temperature is lower during your follicular phase and higher in your luteal phase, then you can predict when you're ovulating and you can predict when you're going to start bleeding. It's very, very, very interesting. But what translates to training is that you're more heat tolerant. So this is a great time if you want to take advantage of a sauna. Great time if you want to take advantage of outside running. You're probably going to feel okay. Now, this is not neglecting like hydration in any way or being, negligent on those basic like heat stressors, but this does kind of point to, pedal to the metal, which is great. Your energy starts coming back, you're more social, and your creativity is high. This is when you're most like a girl. This is great. Okay. This is when you want to connect to people. This is when you want to plan your outings. This is when your training efficacy is probably getting higher because you're connecting with people in the gym. Because this is our inner spring, we're getting out of that winter, right? We can really take advantage of some probiotic and cholesterol rich foods in preparation for the production of progesterone. If we want progesterone to be high in our luteal phase, because we're hoping that our ovulation was successful in a pregnancy, then of course we want progesterone high in the second half of the menstrual cycle because it's progestation. And the backbone of progesterone is cholesterol, which cholesterol only comes from animal foods, animal fats, right? So springtime, follicular phase, perfect time. Take advantage of those probiotic foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, yogurt, kefir, fermented foods, and eating animal fats, rich in cholesterol. Next, what pertains to training is that because we're still in our anabolic phase of our cycle, we can take advantage of producing more force. I already mentioned the power production. We can continue to take advantage of that. The body also wants to create new neural pathways and wants to rebuild and repair. That's what the anabolic phase does. That's its bread and butter. Okay. New neural pathways means that we're becoming more agile. We're becoming more coordinated. And if that's when we're at our prime, this is a great time to try new exercises. Either try a new exercise in the gym or go to something different. Go to yoga, go to Pilates, go to a boxing class, try out, try out the rower, try out the skier, right? You're creating more pathways from your brain to your muscles, and that will become more efficient more quickly. You are becoming more volume tolerant, meaning that you can start adding back in those cardio sessions. You can start adding back in those heart rate zone 2 sessions, and maybe start adding in, like I said, coordination and agility. Maybe you're adding in some more plyometrics, some things that take a little bit more brain power. Energy is increasing, training efficacy and motivation increases, meaning that they're going to find more connection at the gym. More heat tolerant, meaning that they can use the sauna. Dehydration is less of an issue. The interesting thing is when you're thinking about a 4-week training cycle, that this would kind of correlate to your second or third week on a 4-week training card, meaning that your lifting is about moderate to high volume and moderate to high load. So you started with 3 sets, and then you moved to 4 to 6 sets on main lifts, 4 to 6 sets on accessories. You're adding in a little finisher. You're adding in a burner at the end. You're adding back in some Metcons. You're going back to CrossFit. You're adding in plyometrics and agility. Great time to add in all those positive things. Okay. Cardio sessions can be sprints and threshold repeats and heart rate zone 2. Super volume tolerant. Dump it all in there. Crank it out. Follicular phase, springtime. Great. Ovulatory phase. This is the main event. The main event of our bodies every single month. Okay. All of our hormones are at their highest, including testosterone. So when I said taking the initiative originally in your menstrual cycle, when I had a brain lapse, that specific aspect of the masculine energy actually shows itself during ovulation when testosterone is the highest, meaning that during ovulation, your libido is probably the highest, your motivation is the highest, your initiation is the highest, your willingness to work with other people, probably the highest, energy is the highest. You are firing on all cylinders. You got those female hormones and you got those male hormones. You got the positives of both sexes working in conjunction for you. How cool is that? That's so freaking cool, right? Now, this is like our inner summer. Things are booming, ladies. We are at the highest. Our faces are the prettiest. Look that up. That's kind of crazy. We're the most attractive. Our hair is the prettiest. We're feeling ourselves. We're feeling good in our clothes. We're the bomb.com. Okay. Now, since this is our internal summer, we should really take advantage of like raw or water rich foods. So raw foods would be like sushi, raw vegetables, raw fruits, great raw foods. Okay. Water rich foods and fruit, meaning obviously in the summer, we know that like fruit is just like cranking. Great time to eat a bunch of fruit. Another interesting thing is that this is kind of like the climax of our anabolic phase. Obviously, this is like the very tip top end of it, right? Energy is peaking, coordination and agility are high, most volume tolerant. Testosterone is peaking with the most initiation present, like taking the initiative. But also an interesting thing is that the most aggression is displayed, which could be a positive thing from a masculine energy standpoint that we could take advantage of in an ovulatory phase, right? So if you're talking about a 4-week training card, this would be your 3rd or 4th week on the training card, right? Highest volume, highest loads, lowest repetitions, highest intensities, right? We're finding a 3-rep max. Maybe we're finding a 5-rep max. We're including our agility, our plyometrics. Everything's cranking. Everything is great. Then you kickstart your luteal phase, which I wish it wasn't such of a bummer. But I think all women can probably collectively say that this is a tough time of the month. These next 2 weeks really should only be like 7 to 10 days. But yeah, 7 to 10 days. But this is when we become flexible little girls in our training. Okay, we're not putting the kibosh. Is that a word? Kibosh? I'm not sure. We're not stopping training. That's not what we're doing. We're remaining flexible. We're making adjustments. We're fluid. That's what women do. We make adjustments. We're fluid. Men, sturdy, stuck in the mud, right? They're just keeping on for keeping on's sake. Women, we're juking and we're jiving. This is a phase. This is a time in your menstrual cycle you need to juke and jive. Okay? Estrogen rises again in case that the egg was fertilized. So if you remember, estrogen rose during ovulation, then it dipped. Then it rose again in the luteal phase in hopes that your egg was fertilized. Estrogen, which is increasing, estrogen reduces carb burning ability, meaning that we are more insulin sensitive in our luteal phase. Okay, we'll get there. Because it's reserving our glycogen for potential fertilized egg, meaning that your body does not want to burn its carbohydrates as efficiently in your luteal phase because it's trying to hold on to that energy, glycogen, stored glucose from the carbohydrates that you have eaten for a potential fertilized egg. That's what it wants to do. It wants to kickstart a pregnancy. Okay. Now, if we're talking about training, I can make some broad statements and say that your body has a really good fat burning capacity in the anabolic front half follicular phase, and it has a really difficult time burning carbohydrates in its catabolic luteal phase. Okay. Progesterone also starts to increase progestation, which also in turn actually causes electrolyte depletion. So it could be advantageous for women to take somewhat of an electrolyte supplement during your luteal phase. We're less heat tolerant due to the increase in basal body temperature. So remember when I said that basal body temperature is generally lower in the follicular phase and then it spikes during ovulation and then it stays high throughout its luteal phase? That change in basal body temperature actually makes us less heat tolerant. So that also plays into the electrolyte consumption. It plays into making sure we're eating enough carbohydrates. I think I'll get to it at some point, but actually our metabolism kicks up about 10% in our luteal phase. And that's primarily, I guess if you pair that with that carb burning, that reduction in carb burning capacity means that our metabolism is higher. We're craving carbohydrates. We are being depleted in electrolytes, which actually means that our body's trying to conserve water and we're less heat tolerant. Like that in itself, if you put all of that together, means that in your luteal phase, if you're not eating carbohydrates, if you are in the heat, if you are dehydrated and you're not eating enough carbohydrates, did I just say that? I think I just said that twice. Sorry. Then you will have a really bad training day. And you're going to chalk it up that your program isn't working. But the reality is like you're just in your luteal phase. It's okay, girl. Just work through it. Drink your electrolytes. Eat the carbohydrates. Take a nap. Your follicular phase is coming. That's what that means. Okay? Now, because the rise in estrogen, high hormone phase, estrogen turns down the anabolic capacity of muscles plus the progesterone, which also rises progestation in hopes that the egg was fertilized, increases the catabolic side of muscle tissue, meaning that estrogen is saying, no, we can't build more muscle mass, and progesterone turns up of muscle wasting. So let's put that in perspective. If you're not strength training, I'm going to give these little we should not be strength training during our luteal phase. I'm going to talk to those girls. Because progesterone increases catabolism of muscle tissue, meaning the wasting of muscle tissue. If you are not strength training during your luteal phase because you're nervous and it's too much stress, then not only is your body not wanting to make new muscle tissue because of high estrogen, which downregulates anabolic stimuli, but it's also, if you're not strength training, then you're not necessarily even maintaining the muscle mass that you already have, because progesterone increases the catabolic stimuli of muscle tissue, meaning that it is turning up muscle wasting. So if that's not an argument to strength train during your luteal phase or when you feel like garbage, then I don't know what is. That is an argument for strength training throughout your entire menstrual cycle. We have an entire phase of our 28 to 35 day cycle that promotes more muscle wasting. We got to strength train, ladies. Okay? We got to. There's also a reduction in blood volume due to the increase in progesterone. I already talked about that with the electrolytes. Okay, I'm going to go back one slide here so I can explain that. Progesterone basically causes electrolyte depletion. Okay, so since progesterone is high during this phase, then we will have less blood volume due to less electrolytes hanging onto that water. With less blood volume, that means that because our body knows, it knows how much oxygen and blood and red blood cells we need, like per minute per se or per second, right? Our body knows that. The other secondary factor of that equation is heart rate. So you have blood volume, how much blood is pumping, then you have heart rate, how fast that's pumping equals like the total volume that your body is circulating throughout the minute or hour or whatever, right? If you have less volume of blood, on the other side of that multiplication issue or equation, you need to increase your heart rate to maintain a steady stroke volume or a steady amount of blood pumping through your body, right? So that also means then in your luteal phase that your resting heart rate will probably be more elevated. So let's paint the picture in your luteal phase, right? More muscle wasting ability, more muscle wasting ability. We need more electrolytes. We need more carbohydrates. Our metabolism is 10% higher. We're craving probably more carbohydrates because our body is trying to conserve carbohydrates for potential pregnancy. Increased heart rate. All these things are happening, right? Let's see. Okay, I said all those things. This is actually the perfect time for a deload week, is actually during your luteal phase. Okay, meaning that because we've become slightly more intolerant to all these like training themes and factors, we should actually cut the volume and cut the load. But because of that muscle wasting kind of uptick, we really should still be having a neural pathway created. We should still be training. We should still do our best to maintain the muscle mass that we have. Absolutely. But in regards to your training phase, maybe we're limiting the agility. Maybe we are limiting some of the high intensity training because we're probably not having good strength and power outputs. But we can still absolutely maintain the muscle mass that we have. Okay. Now the question comes up, should you cycle sync or should you not cycle sync? I get this question so much. There's two ends of the picture here, right? One end of the picture is saying, absolutely, I love cycle syncing. This is amazing and perfect and great. But oftentimes I do see that most women that cycle sync don't really know what they're capable of. And I think a lot of women that blast like these basic statements of like women should only be walking, it's too much cortisol, it's too much stress, right? They have lived such a low capacity life already that of course going for a run feels stressful to them. But when you've ran 50 miles, a 5-mile run in heart rate zone 2 with electrolytes and water and like a liter and a half of water doesn't feel that stressful. Like it doesn't feel that crazy. And that's not to be, arrogant or facetious. I'm just saying that when you live a low capacity life, of course running feels stressful. Of course strength training feels stressful. Of course CrossFit feels stressful. Of course, right? So what I'm saying is if we can take this information objectively and put it into whatever style of training that you have, right? Whether it's strength training, basic strength training, maybe it's CrossFit, maybe it's yoga, right? There are some of these pillars that you can transfer to your style of training. Meaning if you're just a yogi and for some reason you have found my podcast, don't know why you're here. I hope it's encouraging you to strength train. Then know that you can take maybe even just like the one bullet point of when you're heat tolerant and not heat tolerant. And so maybe on the front half of your menstrual cycle, girl, you're doing hot yoga, you're cranking it out. Maybe on the latter half of your menstrual cycle, maybe you're opting for regular yoga, not hot yoga. Simple pillar you can apply to whatever training cycle you are doing. Okay. Now, I actually don't recommend cycle syncing for any type of like true athlete. If you're training something for something, if you're training for a half marathon, if you're a CrossFitter, if you are, a college athlete, if you're a professional athlete, this is just not reasonable. It's just not reasonable. Okay. And, there's a lot of men in this world who are saying like, women got to suck it up. It's game time. We got a game. I don't care if you're in your luteal phase. And I'm like, okay, the delivery could probably be a little bit better. Kelly Starrett. I've heard him say that 17,000 times. It makes me want to barf. Love him as a practitioner. Drives me nuts to hear such a harsh way to deliver it. But I think there's truth in what he's saying. Okay. Basically just saying that, no, we cannot manage a group of field hockey players. We cannot manage their menstrual cycles. And again, this is all assuming they're not on birth control, which is something that's very interesting. And especially that I brought up when I was working at the university was that, great, we can like cycle sync all we want. But the reality is most college girls are on hormonal birth control. They are. I think it's upwards of something like 70 to 75% of them. So it's like these pillars are not even relevant to that population. So this is the question you should be asking as an athlete, as a female athlete, is one, are you on birth control? If you are, then like don't delete the information that I'm saying, but like maybe consider another route. Okay. But because you can't change your training calendar and you can't change your performance calendar or your competition calendar, right? You have no say over those things. What you can do is you can take this information objectively and apply it to your training plan that you already have in place. And I'll give you an example. Okay. Somebody at a conference like years ago said something like, I'm not a good coach by what I program. I'm a good coach by what I change on the program. And that itself is coaching. No coach in the world, or if a coach does do this, they're a bad coach. No coach ever writes like an 8-week program, hands it over to an athlete, and then is totally hands off and doesn't make any changes as you go. That is so unrealistic. Even for men, so unrealistic. You're going to have to make adjustments week by week. You're flowing with that athlete, figuring out what they like, what they don't like, what things they need to do and shouldn't do, what things hurt them and don't hurt them. Those are natural things that happen in coaching. So as a coach, if you know this information and you have a female athlete and you know that, let's say they had the biggest race of their life in their late luteal phase, then does it mean that they pull out of the race? Oh my gosh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. That makes me so mad even to think about. I had that question posed. Like, should I pull out of the competition? No. You know what that means? You should know that in your late luteal phase, you're less heat tolerant, you need more carbohydrates, you need more electrolytes, and you're probably going to be tired and grumpy. So as a coach or as the athlete, you know what you should do? Eat carbohydrates, eat more electrolytes, be hydrated, stay in the shade, have an ice pack. That's how you equip yourself for competition in less than optimal environments. That's what you're doing. That's what you're doing. You're staying fluid and you're staying flexible. That's how you work around it. Okay. It's just not feasible. And you're setting yourself up. You're trying to take a fluid system and you're trying to create it more stable. You're trying to put these masculine styles of energy in like this really harsh structure. But if you can take this information and take its qualities and put it in a feminine structure of adjusting, adapting, understanding, connecting, you can do amazing things. Okay? So does that answer your question to cycle sync or to not? Overarching answer, no, don't do it. A lot of people ask me if I do it. I say, no, you need to learn about your menstrual cycle and you need to take the bull by the horns and you need to train. Just make some adjustments as you go. Okay? Because ultimately it puts the agency back in your hands. I think that's why, if I could boil it down, I think it puts the agency back in your hands as the athlete, or if you're listening to this and you're a coach, puts the agency back in your hands of what decisions you're going to make for yourself for that day. If you cycle sync and you're trying to make a really stable and structured plan, then you're still not listening to yourself. You're still not challenging yourself necessarily. I hope I make that distinction. Obviously, as a group, no, you cannot cycle sync if you have a group setting. If you're an individual athlete, potentially, you can make some adjustments, but don't die to it, right? Some considerations back to the birth control. 40 to 60% greater gain in muscle mass without the birth control pill, naturally because of the rise and fall of progesterone. Now, let's take it back to some science that I said earlier, right? Estrogen downregulates anabolic activities. Progesterone increases catabolic activities. If you're taking synthetic estrogen and progesterone every single day throughout your menstrual cycle from birth control, then every single day you are you're downregulating anabolic activities. You're downregulating oh gosh, gotta back up. You are downregulating anabolic activities. You're upregulating catabolic activities. That's what you're doing every single day when you take estrogen and progesterone. Okay? Oral contraceptives slow muscle recovery after a hard workout and may dim aerobic capacity, directly from Stacy Sims herself, page 25 in Roar, the book Roar, 2016, published in 2016. I'll link all of my sites on the podcast notes, okay? But that's the main book I get a lot of this information from. Stacy Sims, she's great. Some perimenopause considerations. Women definitely should be prioritizing strength training over cardio, mainly because of the decrease in estrogen, which promotes a decrease in metabolism, increases the risk of osteopenia, osteoporosis. Women drastically need weight-bearing exercises. It's also becoming much more difficult to metabolize carbohydrates. And so obviously we know that strength training metabolizes carbohydrates because you're using your on-site carbohydrates throughout your exercise. Strength train, ladies. A couple of the things that are interesting that are part of my project and not really part of this podcast are some musculoskeletal considerations, males versus females. I'm just going to list them off. I'm not going to deep dive these because it's kind of off topic. But obviously we know like the Q angle between the hips and knees, men and women are different. Men are like a square or like a rectangle. Women are like triangles specifically, right? Their knees fall inward than the points of their hips. Women have smaller hands. So if you're considering like pull-ups or you're considering farmer's carries, women are naturally going to be a little bit more limited in their farmer's carry because their hands are smaller, limiting their grip on the implement. Also, we've already said that women naturally have a smaller total body mass And in strength training specifically, mass moves mass, meaning that if you think about like a sled push, for example, right? If you took a man and a woman of the exact same weight, body fat percentage, and muscle mass, mass moves mass, they would be pretty identical. The difference would be about 2.5%, not statistically significant between the two. Okay, so let's take an example. You took a woman who's 150 pounds, 20% body fat, and has like X amount of muscle mass. Let's say 100 pounds of muscle mass. I don't know, right? Same with the man, 150 pounds, 20% body fat, and has the same muscle mass, right? Exactly the same. Now, I'm not accounting for the aerobic effects that lean more towards males, right? Higher blood volume, those kinds of things, right? Not necessarily hitting on that, but two identical human beings, they could probably push a sled or they could bench press about the same as each other, which is really interesting. 2.5% difference, which is not statistically significant. Other things maybe to consider. Women are more mobile in their joints. Men are more stable. So again, if you kind of look at like the strength output or power output, men are going to have a little bit more zing to them because they're just tighter. They're not as mobile. They're not as flexible. Women are more flexible because we have to birth children. That's why we're more flexible. We also have hormones that promote more flexibility. Women also have more type 1 muscle fibers, which means we actually have a better endurance capability than men. And we're actually seeing that in most like marathon races. Women are really starting to creep up with men. There's still a drastic difference between men and women in endurance events, mainly because one, more men do the endurance events. So the population of women is naturally going to be smaller in regards to your sample size. But also men have been doing endurance events for decades and generations longer than women. I'm not a modern feminist, but I don't think the first woman ever ran a marathon until like the 60s, I think. I don't know, fact check me on there. Untrained women are about 52% as strong as women. Let me back up. Let me take a glass of water. Oh my gosh, I can't even speak. Let me take a sip of water. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting some messages here. Okay. Untrained women are about 52% as strong as men, but trained women are about 70 to 80% as strong as men. All that is saying is that this is trainable. We can close the gap. That's what that means. Okay. Don't get discouraged by the 70 to 80% as strong as men. And don't make that an emotional argument. We can be just as strong as men. That's not what I mean. Objectively. Okay. But that all that means is that we can train it. We can close the gap. That's amazing. Females can tolerate greater upper body resistant exercise volume than men, mainly because of higher type 1 muscle fibers, which is more of an endurance muscle fiber. Men are more type 2 muscle fibers. Okay. Cardio considerations, more interesting things. Because women have more type 1 muscle fibers, we have, like I said, greater advantage in endurance training. Women naturally have a smaller heart and lungs, which leads to lower oxygen carrying capacity, about 25 to 30% less than men, which leads to higher heart rates and less heat tolerance, which I've already talked about. But because of that, in turn, our mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell, becomes more dense, meaning more efficient than men. So women actually have a higher mitochondrial density than men. Pretty interesting stuff. Nutritional considerations: women have 70 to 80% lower endogenous creatine stores than men, meaning that we can uptake and use creatine much more efficient than men. Women take 5 grams at least of creatine every single day. Okay, in the morning, just take it. Other nutritional considerations: we've already talked hydration status, dehydration, electrolytes according to our menstrual phase. During our late luteal phase, progesterone is high, leading to increased muscle breakdown, catabolism, like we've already talked about, meaning that women can probably benefit from a high protein meal post exercise that's more beneficial for women than it is for men. Recovery considerations, okay, post exercise metabolism. Post exercise metabolism. Women's metabolism drops back down to normal about 3 hours after exercise, whereas men's metabolism remains high for 21 hours. So, ladies, if you have asked the question of, or if you thought, my husband can work out one time and lose 10 pounds, and I work out one time and I gain 10 pounds. Yeah, that's what that means, ladies. Okay. Men's metabolism stays high 21 hours later. Think about the compounding effect that has. If a man exercises every day at 5 p.m., right? He works out for 2 hours, 5 to 7 p.m. 21 hours later, he's sitting at, what is that? 2 p.m. the next day, meaning that his metabolism is just back down to baseline for 3 hours. And then he cranks on it again and again, and day after day after day. If men consistently train, then their metabolism is extremely high, which is so interesting to think about. Women's metabolism goes back to normal levels 3 hours after exercise. So no wonder we don't burn as many calories per bout of exercise, which points further towards we got to stop counting the calories, ladies. We just need to train and get better at skills, living simple learning skills. We need to train. We need to be so proud of what we can do, not thinking about counting calories. That shouldn't be like, daunting to think about how your metabolism reacts to exercise. All that should mean is like, let's just take our focus off of our metabolism and how many calories we're burning, and let's focus more on activities that we love to do. Alcohol, more recovery considerations. Each drink increases estrogen levels by over 5%. In 4 or more drinks per day increases estrogen by 60%. What does estrogen do in a woman's body? Stores fat, and it downregulates anabolic effects, right? Cut the alcohol, ladies, especially if you're trying to improve your body composition. Cut it. Heart rate variability. HRV is highest in your follicular phase. So if you have a Whoop band or an Aura ring, you will see that HRV is going to be highest during your front half of your menstrual cycle, which makes sense because we're the most resilient. HRV is a sign of how our body's responding to stress. It's lowest, HRV is lowest in our luteal phase due to sympathetic nervous system increase from progesterone. Progesterone also increases your fight, flight, or freeze. Progesterone, okay? Sympathetic nervous system. Sleep. Associated with high levels of psychological distress and greater feelings of hostility, depression, and anger. Facts. If women don't sleep, which women need more sleep than men, if women don't sleep, then they show signs of higher psychological distress than men, meaning that men typically can operate better on less amounts of sleep than women can. Take that as it is, okay? Okay, now I'm getting into pregnancy considerations, which is like a whole other beast. I'm not even going to touch on that one because I just need to have a guest on to talk about pregnancy considerations. I hope you learned a lot. I talked a lot, fumbled through the information. We made it. Go enter into my giveaway. Have a great Thursday. Hope you're staying cool. Look at your training. That's what I'll say. Look at your training cycle. Look at how you're exercising. Stay fluid, stay flexible. Take this objective information that I've told you and apply it to your current training cycle. Make those adjustments for yourself and see if you can just stick to your plan. Last thing I'll leave oh my gosh, I literally can't speak today. I'm so sorry. Last thing I'll say here is because women are more flexible, more fluid, we're kind of more up and down naturally, just based on our physiology, is that it can be hard to string together moments of trust with yourself when it comes to your exercise plan. I said that one time to a client and she really loved it. And I feel like that can apply to my own life, right? Is like we just don't trust our plan. We don't trust our plan. We don't trust ourselves. We don't trust the process because we're up and down. We have different feelings on different days, right? We're not stable in that way. And I don't mean that to be, like it sounds like women are crazy. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that it can be harder to create a trust pattern in our lives when it comes to exercise. But I would really challenge you that the more information you have, the better decisions you can make for the day when it comes to your training. We know that consistency beats intensity, meaning that if you just string together moments of trust with yourself and your plan, you're probably going to feel a lot better in the long run. So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say you just started a new like half marathon training program and you get into your luteal phase and you feel like flipping garbage, right? You know that you're less heat tolerant, you're less volume tolerant. You can choose to not train at all, but you are distrusting yourself and the process. And you're not really improving on the plan that or towards the goal that you set in the first place. So I'd encourage you to don't give yourself the all or nothing mindset when it comes to your training plan, especially if you're trying to you're trying to, make better decisions with this cycle syncing idea. What that would mean is that you take this information and you create a trusted pattern in your body and you would say, okay, I don't feel very good. I'm in my luteal phase. I'm less heat tolerant. I need more carbohydrates and I'm less volume tolerant. What that could mean is like maybe this week I swim. You're still getting a cardiac output. You're still getting, you're getting non-impact cardio. You are taking out the heat intolerance because you're swimming. Feels amazing, right? Maybe you swim with a friend. Maybe you increase your connection. Maybe you have more fun. Maybe you have higher training efficacy because you're doing it with more people. That's how you would make those small adjustments based on your cycle. Okay? Easier said than done. Fully realize that. But as you start to absorb this information, I just want to challenge you to continue to train and yeah, just keep on keeping on.